Welcome to the European Society of Comparative Literature, where all friends of literatures and arts are welcome. The ESCL Excellence Award for Collaborative Research has been awarded since 2021 for an outstanding edited volume that makes an original contribution to the field of comparative literature. Today, we are discussing the first recipient of this award in 2021, the book Great Immortality, Studies on European Cultural Sainthood, published by Brill in 2019 and edited by our guests today, Marijan Dović and Jón Karl Helgason. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Marijan Dović is a senior research associate at the Institute of Slovenian Literature and Literary Studies, the Research Center of Slovenian Academy of Sciences and Arts. He is also an associate professor at the postgraduate school. He published on Slovenian literary and cultural history, systemic and empirical approach to literature, literary evaluation, literary canon, cultural nationalism, national poets, cultural saints, literature, and censorship. He also serves as a chair of the 2026 ESCL Book Award Committee. Jón Karl Helgason is a professor in Icelandic and comparative cultural studies at the University of Iceland, teaching in the departments of Icelandic and Icelandic as a second language. His primary research areas are the reception of the Icelandic sagas, Icelandic 20th century cultural history, cultural saints of Europe, metafiction, translation studies, and reception studies. The first question that we are going to begin with would be, how do you define cultural sainthood and who becomes a cultural saint?
Perhaps I should say first that me and Jón Karl are both literary scholars. We were both dealing with poetry and poets first, but then after looking at some patterns of their posthumous veneration and canonization, we came to a conclusion that this could be viewed as as part of broader picture. So actually, we do give an attempt of a definition of a cultural saint in our book, National Poets, Cultural Saints, and this notion of cultural sainthood, a cultural saint, applies to departed artists and intellectuals that have been singled out as leading representatives of their regional or national culture and are made to embody certain elementary cultural and political ideals. In this way, they in fact appropriate a social status and symbolic significance that has traditionally been reserved for kings and religious saints. In a way, so we are looking at cultural saints as modern saints, especially in connection to nationalism and national movements, because this is one of the things that really happened in the course, especially of the long 19th century, when dead individuals from the field of culture, but especially poets and writers, were really gaining a lot of importance in and their cults and rituals associated to them were really flourishing.
But at the same time, we were trying to make a framework that would work for other artists, and we know that in different European countries, painters, composers, architects have, in some instances, served the same role, and the framework itself is I think flexible for various other studies outside of literature.
Yeah, it actually turned out that this model that we developed in our first book. So we are also speaking about the first book that was the basis for Great Immortality. actually helped many scholars in many very different cultures and tradition to cope with the similar phenomena. So it in a way it turns to be a useful tool.
Thank you. This brings me to the second question. Could you present the relationship between the two books, between Great Immortality, published in 2019, and National Poets, Cultural Saints, Canonization, and Commemorative Cults of Writers in Europe, and how they differ or partake to a similar theoretical background? And share with us a bit of your extensive research on this topic.
Well, Great Immortality is published, as you say, in 2019, and our monograph is published 2 years earlier. But the relationship is actually quite complex because many of the contributors to our Great Immortality took part in conferences that partially Marijan was organizing with Joep Liesen, a scholar from the Netherlands. So a lot of the things you find in Great Immortality actually inspired some of our own research, but the whole project began with a smaller project with Marijan and me and two other scholars from Iceland and Slovenia. So the idea is it was a bit like playing table tennis. They went first between Iceland and Slovenia, and then we exchanged a lot of ideas with the contributors of Great Immortality.
Well, in fact, the book, the first book, National Poets, Cultural Saints, is mostly based on our research. I mean, its important part are the two detailed case studies of two national poets, the Icelandic national poet Jonas Hallgrimsson and the Slovenian national poet Prešeren. But the first part of the book, I think, does three very important things. First, we try to outline and to define a concept of a cultural saint. Then we are giving a historical overview of commemoration practices, especially regarding the poets and writers. And then in the third chapter, I think we present a model, an expanded model of canonization. And this model is perhaps one of the most visible outcomes of this book. And this model was actually used by many contributors to Great Immortality. So Great Immortality is, in fact, dealing with much broader range of cases. For example, we have apart from the more general chapters, we have discussions of what happened with Dante and Petrarch, for example, which were the early examples of how to develop a posthumous afterlife of important writers. And then we move to a number of important cases from Slavic literatures, like Adam Mickiewicz, the Polish national poet, and Taras Shevchenko, France Prešeren, a Jewish national poet, Bialik, Catalan national poet, Jacint Verdaguer. Then we are looking at specific situations in Flemish context, in Croatian, Illyrian context. And then we're also looking at some individuals that were not coming from the field of literature, like architects, scholars, and so on. So actually, what Great Immortality does is to give a broader range of studies and shows how this concept of cultural saints that we developed in the first book could be applied.
And if I may add, we also encourage the authors in Great Immortality to challenge the framework, challenge our ideas, and there are contributors who are doing that in great Immortality, and we are actually hoping this is a concept that will not be fixed once for all, but will be a part of a broader and longer discussion.
How did the fact that some Romantic poets entered the paradigm of cultural sainthood affected the reception of their literary work?
Well, this brings us to actually to the beginning of the project, I think, because as I already mentioned, we are both coming from literary studies with comparative background, and we were first looking at our let's say our national poets, the poets that were really gaining most attention after they died, and we were trying to figure out what is going on with decades and even centuries after their deaths, and it was for me it was really surprising to see that the patterns of canonization were so similar in cultures, in two cultures that are so distant, like Slovenia and Iceland, that virtually had no mutual context. So, how is it possible to have such structural similarities? We have major celebrations. We have statues that are raised almost at the same time. So we were thinking about how to how to figure out the pattern, and we actually found out that there is a pattern on a European level. But what happens to poets that got caught into the mechanism of this cult? Of course, they were canonized in many ways. That we know. Their texts were, of course, edited, looked at from a variety of perspectives. They were appropriated and so on. But apart from this usual concept of canonization, we were also looking at their graves, funerals, what happens at their graves, the monuments, what happens with the monuments, and especially the commemorative rituals, which are very important for keeping the cults alive. So basically, we could say that these individuals have become an object of a nationalist cult in many cases. This is certainly true for Prešeren or Hallgrimsson.
And it's also very interesting that, let's say, this process of canonization, a writer or an artist, it goes through different periods. And usually in the beginning, the people who are behind it are friends of the person, or the poet, in many cases, has been a part of the national revival movement and an independent movement. But as we move closer to contemporary times, it's actually official institutions like the parliament, the central bank, institutions that have nothing to do with literature, that actually cultivate the memory. And for me as a literary scholar, it was revealing to just realize that literary scholars are not the people who decide this in the end, but more politicians or even bankers. And we see this same process of canonization taking place more or less at the same time from one country to the other. And that's, of course, a sign of the fact that even in the late 19th century, communication between countries was very vivid, even if we didn't have the internet. And I think that explains the similarities from countries that are far apart and don't have any direct contact. Most of them have contact through nations like UK, France, or I think Germany is very important in this respect. So, but there are things there that almost feel unreal. And Marijan and I, we often talked about the fact that Jonas Hallgrimsson and Prešeren, they are almost like identical twins, and they never met.
Double gamers. What are your current projects or current publications?
Well, for the past few years, I've more or less left this area of studies. I'm writing now about Icelandic literary history, and more generally about the 20th century cultural history of Iceland. I'm working with a concept of infrastructure, looking at the way in which culture is based on soft and hard infrastructure. So I'm in a new area, you might say.
Well, I just finished a project on censorship, which was more or less based on Slovenian culture. It was I was actually looking at the influence of censorship on the entire Slovenian cultural field during the long 19th century. Yes, I published a book. We had a large exhibition, but I sometimes still go back to the topic of national poets and cultural saints, occasionally with some lecture or something. And I recently, I'm just waiting to have published an article on national poets, which actually draws from our research from before, which is like kind of overview of national poets in small European literary cultures. It's going to be published in Lettonica. But I have a new project which is partly inspired with great immortality, and this is the Pantheon, the project on European national pantheons. So in a way, we're looking with a small team in Ljubljana and with some foreign consultants. We are looking at the ways how nations built the pantheons that would commemorate their greats. So this could basically be done in the form of a special temple like Valhalla in Regensburg, or this could happen in a church which was previously a royal necropolis. And in many cases, it is also just a simple graveyard which is turned into a pantheon. So we are again trying to get a larger picture of how these things developed on European scale, because so far most attention has been directed to the great examples like Rome, Paris, the Westminster Abbey, London, and so on.
Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.